Workout 3 and Team Workout 4. You also have 3 total days as well going until Monday. We're going to take a look at workout number 3 right now. So at this point, you've already done the first 2 tests that we just described. Again, there is some flexibility, but workout 3, as it's written, is male, same gender pairs. So male, male, female, female. 4-time, pair 1, male, male, followed by pair 2, female, female, 500-meter row, 50 handstand push-ups, 1 station, switches needed with the athletes working, 50 synchro wall ball shots. Once both pairs are through, then pair 1 followed by pair 2 again, and you're essentially going in reverse order. 50 synchro wall ball shots, 50 handstand push-ups, 500-meter row. Now, the wall balls are standard weight, 14 pounds and 20 pounds, 9-foot target for the women, 10-foot target for the men. Andre, I think for most people looking at this, outside of maybe the handstand push-ups, this probably seems like the most, I don't know, maybe straightforward workout for them in terms of rowing, wall ball stuff we see every day. And then in the very least, the handstand push-ups aren't synchro. There's something you get to kind of split up. And if we're going off here, the total volume in each section is about 25 handstand push-ups per athlete.
Yes. In each section. So yeah. So it'll be 15 total after the whole workout. Yep. Assuming that they will break it or split it evenly. Mm-hmm. I think a cool workout. Like, it has another element, which is you get to be tested in synchro. You get to be tested in the average kind of like ability of the team. Like, it doesn't matter if one guy is or girl is at rowing and the other one is not good. Like, you can't get off the rower until everybody's done, which will give an advantage to testing teams in terms of, hey, we want to see balanced teams. If, like, I remember Adrian saying on one podcast, like, my job is to figure out if that team has a weak link, either exercise wise or a weak, athlete, and we're going to make sure they can't get through if they can. We're going to give benefits to the teams that have, 4 athletes that are at the same level and same capabilities. I think so. I think it has cool element with the synchro on the wall balls, and then again, an element that is nice in terms of strategy and in terms of using the strengths of the team, where you can choose who's gonna do the handstand push-ups, who's gonna do how many, how we're gonna break it. Volume perspective, it's all right. It's not excessive. I think it's right there it's appropriate. It's the elite will still separate themselves at this volume, but the RX or mid of the pack athletes will still be able to complete the workout with, having a good experience. I think the 500-meter row pace should be at about 2K target, so 2K row, about that pace. You cannot come out too slow, even though, only on 500 meters, you cannot make a big jump in the first segment, but at the top, you still have to come out at a pace that is fast enough in order to not fall behind. And as it's kind of we go, you go, you're going to be guaranteed a lot of rest every time. So once the first male-male pair has completed the 500-meter row, the 50 wall balls, 50 wall balls,
Yep.
And 50 handstand push-ups and then 50 wall balls, then they're going to have tons of rest. So with this amount of volume, you can put the hammer down from the beginning.
Yeah.
So even if you row hard, 50 sync wall balls at elite level is still nothing. Most people can do carry unbroken. However, there's going to be an interference with the wall balls and the handstand push-up. For most people, wall balls are mostly taxing in the shoulders more than in the legs. And so that transition between these two will be pretty hard. This handstand push-ups into wall balls. I recommend that you have, your worst handstand push-up athlete kind of start after the row, and then have your strongest handstand push-up athlete finish the repetitions, because the fatigue going into the wall balls, you want to have the athlete that has the biggest shoulder endurance capacity so that you can still keep the wall balls unbroken, or at least without falling apart. So it's kind of reverse of the ring muscle up workout where you have your strongest ring muscle up athletes start and then the weaker go. It's the opposite here. We have the weaker start because we want to give them more rest time before we start the wall balls. I think for top teams, 2K row speed, we're going to see the handstand push-ups broken maximum once, simply just to divide it. I think we could definitely see plenty of teams that could do 50 handstand push-ups unbroken, as well as doing 50 wall balls unbroken, and not letting that affect them in the next segment either. So the next segment, I like that it's kind of like a chipper format where it kind of starts like that and then, goes back up, which challenges the patterns even more because the wall balls will be again, so the shoulder density is very heavy in the middle, as if the row had been, if it had been just 2 rounds of that workout, the row kind of gives that break. So I like the format, and it also allows for the last 500-meter row to really be, let's see who can hurt. Like I've written in the notes for the team athletes, like this is where you suffer for your team because this workout can come down to seconds, and rowing, you can end yourself and be fine 1 hour later because there's no eccentric loading, there's no loading on your body totally, and so you can really just empty the tank. And here it's just full throttle, to be honest. Like there's no strategy there. You should come out hard and be hard in the middle and finish hard as well.
Is that something that, I don't know, so I feel like some athletes relish that opportunity more than others? You see that 500 meter at the end and you're like, all right, this is a chance for me to just go bonkers. You're a little bit larger athlete in terms of your height. Is that something where you're like licking your chops at the end of the workout? I picture the Butcher's Lab team from 2020 with you and Julian back in the day. And I picture you guys just absolutely hammering this last piece for it. Is this something that is sitting in the back of your mind? It makes you a little bit nervous knowing that you're going to have to punish yourself.
No, I think it should make you excited, to be honest. Like it's 500 meters, you can really suffer at that distance, but I still think like if it was a 2K row in the end or 1K, there you can really dig to a different level. So I think it's a this should scare you a little bit, but it's still short enough for you to, like, it will be over before you know it. And there's not that much fatigue going into it. Like I said, you have that big break and then you're back on 50 wall balls, 50 handstand push-ups. I mean, even during handstand push-ups, you have a break before, or one of them at least will have before they start the rowing. And even for the athletes that doesn't, it's not a lot of interference between those two. So it will really allow you to just go, pedal to the metal from start to finish. And I think just one more note on like the exercises here, like I said, with low tension and high tension, wall balls is also an exercise. If you have good mobility, your torso should be able to stay pretty upright, which doesn't really, if you don't have good mobility and you have to lean forward a lot, then wall balls get quite challenging because it's the line of where it's at from the body will be in front, and the further it is from the center of the body, the more load it will feel like. And so I think it's just key that that's a low tension exercise. So just make sure you're relaxing, make sure your legs are doing as much as they can. So you're going to need your shoulders quite a bit for the handstand push-ups. And so really try to maximize the output from the lower body throughout those reps. But again, you don't need to be tight. It's a 20 or 14 pound ball. You don't need to create any sort of tension through your midline, which kind of restricts the breathing. So just make sure that's nice and relaxed. For the handstand push-ups, it's kind of the same. It doesn't require a lot of tension. This one is just all about timing. And I think especially for the bigger athletes, which is the kipping handstand push-ups is quite challenging because the line is very close to the wall. And so they can't really, because of their size, create a nice tripod. It's just too tight for them to come down. So that's just one thing to really be aware of. And also the standards they have made, with the feet staying within the hands, and especially on the last repetition as well, that people tend to have a tendency of like either arching at the lower back or shooting the head too much for the arms, or sorry, the other way towards the wall. So just make sure your last repetition, just take that extra second to make sure that's a clean rep. And the rowing, there's not much to say, like just send it.
Yeah, exactly. And I do have that standard up here on for anyone that's watching. And just a reminder, the handstand push-up standard is the 30-inch tape line, 10 inches from the wall to the outside edge of the line. Yeah, and I believe it's you basically have to make sure that you're touching that tape line in some capacity. So it's a similar standard that we saw show up in the Open last year with that singular tape line. But just because I know a lot of people are always curious what standard they're going to roll out for handstand push-ups, so it looks like this is going to be at least the standard kind of moving forward. Yeah, so that outside of the individual components, it does seem to me like the elite athletes, and I always go back to this because that seems to be one of the complaints online, is like, where is there something for the elite athletes to sink their teeth into? And to me, this one just seems simple as, like you mentioned, drop the hammer. They're going to be faster, bigger chunks, and they're not going to be able to let up. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it just seems like the top teams, like if your no shortcuts team from last year was going at it, you guys would hammer this. There would be no question on keeping the good rhythm and keeping the hammer down the entire way. Whereas the other mid to lower level teams might start to slow down in their transitions and turnaround.
Yeah, I think like the handstand push-ups, that's where the separator just will be done like this, because the top teams will break it once. One will do 25, another will do 25, or maybe 20 and 30 or something like that. And the lower level will do maybe 15, 15, 10, 10. That's already 2 transitions more. And already there, that's 6 seconds maybe in transitions. You have that times each, like the male pair in round 1, the female pair, that's 12 seconds, then 24 seconds with the second part. And you can't win 24 seconds on 500-meter row. So yeah, already there, that's where the separator will be. And yeah, so nice to see shoulder endurance. So like I feel in when we kind of like project as a programmer, like when you want to prepare your athletes for quarterfinals, semifinals, there's certain classic type of workouts that we see. We always see like maybe CrossFit endurance, as you can categorize it in, which is like plus 15-minute piece. We have some of that here. Then you see a classic CrossFit format, which is like a 7 to 15-minute threshold. Then you have like a power window, CrossFit power, which is like 3 to 7 minutes. And then you might have an interval. So those are like the 4 types of formats that we can see, or time thresholds. And then we can differ the test in. We always have a grip test, more grippy test. We always have a shoulder endurance test, and this is the shoulder endurance test. The test prior was a grip test. And yeah, so I think it's just nice to see, okay, we have those two. And I think for most programmers from the different program companies or coaches, that's like 2 type of tests that you definitely have prepared your athletes for, because they always come, and they're always the bottleneck of who's going to make it. It's always like a really grippy test or a really shoulder endurance test, and then of course there's like the absolute strength test, but it has these categories. And even though we don't know the test, and the CrossFit presents what seems like a lot of chaos, if you analyze all the tests, you know what the themes are going to be, you know what the limiters they're testing. And I think right now it's just nice to see that they've tested grip, they've tested shoulder endurance, and the next test they're testing strength capacity.
Yep, and that segues us nicely into that 4th and final test, the strength capacity. And I think for most of us mere mortals, Andre, for us, this is the heavy test. This is the one where, absent of a maximal lift or a high power, this is where I think some people who are not the elite level, maybe they made it to quarterfinals, but they're just trying to have a good time. They might end up staring at the barbell a little bit longer than they anticipate with this. And I'll read off the workout as written. It is in same gender pairs again, as many reps as possible in 15 minutes of 30 deadlifts, the female pair, 30 deadlifts for the male pair, 30 shoulder to overhead for the female pair, 30 shoulder to overheads for the male pair. Now, the deadlifts are 205 for the women and 315 for the men. The shoulder to overhead are 125 pounds for the women and 185 pounds for the men. And again, this is an AMRAP, so it's as many reps as possible in 15, and you're just going to repeat this cycle. There's no escaping the barbell.
Exactly. So I think that the way I would start by looking at the workouts, like, okay, 15 minutes, it's 900 seconds. A deadlift and a shoulder to overhead will be most likely, or for most people on our speed chart, it's like 1.5 seconds per rep. So that gives, if there was no transitions and it was just one athlete holding onto the bar the whole time, would give a potential for 600 reps. Now, we know that it's not going to be possible to do 600 reps because there's going to need to be some transitions and maybe the rep speed will drop. So I kind of projected that the rep speed will be about like 2.5 seconds, and that includes the transition times. If you have 2.5 seconds per rep, including transition times, it gives a potential to do 3 full rounds of the workout. So it's 360 reps, which is 90 reps per athlete, which is 45 deadlifts at the working weight and 45 shoulder to overhead. So it's like Fran volume on the barbell. And I think like, so that's like about where the top teams, I estimate they will be. And it's like just nice to know, okay, you know, it's 45, it's going to be about 45 deadlifts and 45 shoulder to overhead. And so already knowing that, you know, based on your training, how you feel about that volume. Is that a volume, like, could you do 21:59 unbroken with 315 deadlifts and box jumps, like that test we've seen in the past with regionals?
Yep.
Like, okay, well, then you know this type of volume is fine for you. Like you can come out probably harder than you think you can, even though it looks like a lot of reps for a long time, but only one is working at a time. So whenever you're working, you're guaranteed 3 times the amount of rest if you divide the reps equally. So that's also something key to keep in mind. Like, I will always have 3 times the amount of rest for my work time in this workout, which is going to be whatever 15 divided by 4 will be 4.5 minutes or something, like 4.2 minutes maybe. So I think that gives like a nice ballpark number of repetitions. 45 each is like maybe the ceiling, and then for mid-pack teams, maybe you're looking at 30 to 35 reps. Lower pack is maybe 20, 25 reps. So not crazy amount of volume, even for athletes that are not very strong in either of these lifts. For the top teams, because you can stand pretty close to the bar, like the men, I'm not sure if they can stand like next to each other or facing each other, but just say transition time can be like 1.5 seconds, literally. You drop the bar, the next person picks it up. And so because of that, I would, for the elite team, suggest like bigger sets, which would be like 8, 8, 7, 7 on both exercises. So if you and me were the male pair, I would do 8, you would do 8, I would do 7, you would do 7, done deal, finished. Tap the girls in, they do their work, and etc. And then for the middle of the pack teams, it's like, I think the guideline would be small and fast sets. So it could be, I do 5, you do 5. I do 4, you do 4. I do 3, you do 3. I do 3, you do 3. It's kind of nice flow. 5, 4, 3, 3, 3, 3. Done. And for the even lower tier teams, maybe you should just do 3s from the beginning. I think like doing less than 3, then I would not be too hopeful for the chance of making it to the next stage, because, you know, getting the barbell from the floor to the shoulders, on the shoulder to overhead, it just takes time, and it's just that would be really inefficient. So I think overall this test we'll see huge separator again. I think we would have seen like a crazy big separator if that had been 10 kilos heavier or 25 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
Like, then I really think that would have been, with like 185 pounds overhead, I think a lot of guys can cycle that, even if they only have, you know, 315 jerk. But if that had been like 205 or 225, then it would have been, or like, you know, the deadlifts would not have been 315, but 365. that because the elite teams could keep their 8-8-7-7 most likely.
Yeah.
Whereas, the middle of the pack teams, they're maybe down to singles. Just like I said with the last year's quarterfinals with like the 275-pound clean and jerks. If that had been 225, it would not have been the same separator. But 275 just created you saw 40 reps difference between teams. And I think we would have seen even bigger separator here with it just a little bit heavier.
Yeah, and I have a question on that. Is there value in creating that larger separation with a heavier load at this stage if you can still create separation with just a slightly lower load and keep some of the mid to lower tier teams more maybe actively involved in the test?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah.
I think most of the time they're right when they say, the best always makes it through. It doesn't matter if it's, you see it in the open. Of course, there's outliers who can crush dumbbell snatch and burpees over the dumbbell. But I think we still see inside of, top 200, probably 50 games athletes.
Yeah.
And when you compare to, 200, 300,000 people doing the open, it's pretty significant that it's still a lot of the same people that sit in the top, even in such a basic test. So I think even here, it will still be the same fallout in the end. And then hopefully in the next test, in the next stage of the season, we're gonna see more tests. Hopefully, 6, 7, maybe 8 scored events if possible, to have a full well-rounded test where we both get to see some absolute strength, whether it's a ladder or a max lift or a max lift under fatigue or complex or something like that. I definitely think that it would be unfortunate if we didn't then see that at the next stage.
No doubt, and I think a lot of people come to expect that, at least from live competition too, when we're all doing it in person.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to check in with you, and I think this will vary from team to team depending on capacities, but the windows this year, 2 score tests in each 3-day window. Is there a particular schedule that you have that you would advise for your teams here? Because I think there's more than enough time to get those tests in. For some teams, they might be able to maybe sneak a retest in there on 1 or 2, depending on how things go. Is there something where you look at these 4 in each of their separate windows and you're like, all right, I want to do this here, and maybe save one for the end?
Yeah, I think the first thing before I say that will be none of the workouts lend itself to high risk, which means the likelihood of retest would be very low unless you have camera failure or really bomb the strategy. Because, there are no, if you missed your last lift and it added 30 seconds to your score, that's really unfortunate. Or you trip and fall, or I don't know, the barbell rolls out of the picture. But because all the tests are very basic, they're all very low risk and very just who has work capacity. And so I don't think there should be time or necessarily a retest. I have 2 suggestions for completion flow. Suggestion 1 is day 1, Thursday today, you do test 1. Day 2, you do test 2. Saturday, you rest, or you have an opportunity to do a retest if something went wrong. I think it's key that when you finish event 1, you analyze that event. What could we do better? Are we messing up any transitions along the way? Could a better breakup strategy or reversing who goes first in a muscle ups be beneficial? Yes or no? If that's a no and you're pretty content, no retest at that event. Event 2 and day 2. And the reason why I don't want to put them on the same day is because there is some interference between those 2 tests. Both of them have a lot of grip in them. And the dumbbell snatch and ring muscle ups, I just think there is some interference. And if you're really going to send it in the first workout, it might affect just a little bit the second workout. And as you have plenty of days and as there's no risk in the events, it's pointless to take that chance of doing event 2 under fatigue, at least in my mind.
Yeah.
So you do event 1 on one day, event 2 on Friday, event 3, rest or potential retest. And then Sunday, you start with the event 3, and then you do event 4 the next day in the morning, and then in the evening of Monday, you have the potential to potentially do a retest. I mean, at least in Europe, because the window goes until like 2 a.m. So if you hit the strength capacity test event 4 at 9 a.m., I mean, you could be good to either retest that event if necessary, or the event from the day prior. And I wouldn't change the order of any of the events in terms of completion, because like event 1 has ring muscle ups. That's an exercise where it's key to be fresh. Like you can probably still maintain dumbbell snatch capacity and toes to bar even with some interference, but you don't want to risk like your abs being taxed and your pulling being taxed for the ring muscle up. And the same with the last workout is the most it's very taxing in terms of the deadlifts and shoulder to overhead. But if you did that before event 3 is not very taxing. So it's not going to influence event 4. But if you did event 4 and then event 3, because they have some similarities with the shoulder to overhead, the wall balls and handstand push-ups, that could affect that score poorly. But they're not going to affect each other in the other way around.
Yeah.
So that would be my suggestion of flow. And the other suggestion would be that you did Thursday event 1 and 2. Day 2 you rest. Day 3 you retest the events. Day 4 or Sunday you do event 3 and 4. In day 5 you have an opportunity to retest. But I would stick to suggestion 1.
Yep, totally. Well, I mean, Andre, this is fantastic. I know you're a student of the game. I've always loved your analytical approach. Anytime we've ever chatted about programming or working out or whatever it is when we bump into each other at an event. So it's great to hear your insight on these quarterfinals, especially as, you know, we just got them yesterday and there are people that are going to be pouring into it. So if you're listening, watching, take your notes. This is some good stuff from a high-level athlete who knows this stuff.